Hey, Marley.
Hey, Dr. Lydia, how are you?
I'm doing really well. Okay, so in tonight's video, we are talking about PMS and anxiety because if it's one thing that I know, a lot of women carry a secret. We suffer monthly with our period and we try to pretend like we aren't. We try to cover it up, but it affects us and some of us more than others. But if you are feeling anxious every single month, this video is for you. We're going to dive in, we're going to talk about why, and we're going to talk about what you can do about it from a natural mind body perspective. And I will say, if you're a man who stumbled across this video, who is in a partnership with a woman who is menstruating, it is very good to know about this stuff and
Yes.
not be squeamish. Like, don't you find it attractive, Marley, when a man is just like okay or cool with a woman's period?
Yes, absolutely. Because so many of us have learned that it's uncomfortable for other people to talk about it. So then we suppress it and then we feel guilty and ashamed. So when you have a safe space to talk about this stuff, it is absolutely attractive. You feel safe there and it's phenomenal.
Yeah, it can be a real bonding aspect to a relationship when a partner just gets you, no matter if it's heterosexual or homosexual relationships. So I would like to remind you to like and subscribe to this channel because we are going to be covering emotional health topics of so many different sorts. We have a big community of women and we just know what's going on with you guys. And we love covering these kind of hot topics like PMS and anxiety. So I know Marley's going to come at it from a psychological standpoint, from her counseling background, and she's going to tell us a little bit about her story too. Actually, Marley, why don't we start there? Why don't you tell
Sure.
us a little bit about your experience with your period?
Absolutely. I think for a long time, again, like I mentioned, like I just kind of ignored what was going on. And part of that was just the discomfort that and the rules around sort of those like covert rules that weren't ever spoken, but like kind of like don't talk about your period because it's gross and like just keep it to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Those no one ever explicitly told me that, but you just kind of pick up on those messages, right, as you grow up. And it's a bit of it's a very private personal experience. But then when you keep it so close to the cuff, you never really learn about what other people are going through, and
Yeah.
thus you aren't able to normalize it for yourself. So for me, I my PMS came out in bursts of anger and irritability,
Right.
to the point where I was very mean to people in my life, and it caused a lot of relationship troubles.
Mm-hmm.
And as of late, too, what I've been noticing is that heightened anxiety and hopelessness. And I luckily have a wonderful naturopathic doctor who has helped me we've looked at my hormonal imbalances, and she's got me on some adrenal support and also taking a look at some of the estrogen. This is your area of expertise, but I'm learning more and more about my body and, starting to actually pay attention to my cycle. For so long, I just ignored it. It was like, oh, this doesn't affect me. But oh my God, it does. And we can't ignore it. We have to pay attention to it and we have to give ourselves care in those times. And so that was my story. To be completely honest, I think it really damaged one of my past relationships with a partner who I loved dearly. And I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't able to talk about it. I wasn't able to let him know what was going on for me. And now in my relationships, my partner is fully aware of what goes on in my cycle and what happens with my hormonal fluctuations and my mood. So, I have a social support network now and I'm able to talk about it more openly. But that was a major issue for me and it caused a lot of damage in my relationships.
Thank you for sharing so honestly because there's millions of women out there who it really does impact how you show up and it impacts other people. And sometimes we can kind of make a joke about it like, oh, she's on her period, blah blah blah, but
Yeah.
a lot of times it's not funny. Okay, that joke
No.
does not land because we're really suffering, we're really irritable in those moments. And
Mhm.
what Marley's also speaking to is the difference between, and I'm not diagnosing Marley, but the difference between PMS, premenstrual syndrome, and PMDD when you're getting into that dysmorphic disorder. So at that point, it's impacting your relationships, it's impacting your friendships. There's serious consequences with how you're showing up at work. So it's
Mhm.
along a continuum. So we have a different spectrum of the way women experience their period. And for some of us, it's just irritability. It's kind of annoying. And for some of us, we're in that PMDD category. and it's more severe. And for those women, I want to say there's a lot of things that can be done from the natural mind body perspective. And that's what we're going to talk about tonight, because like Marley said, you can feel kind of helpless and hopeless, and then it just puts you on edge. And the thing that's really hard about it is that it's every month. It's cyclical.
Yes.
You get a period of time where you feel good, but you know it's coming for you every single month. And we just don't want that for you. So Marley, why don't you share with us who is at risk of having PMDD?
So with my background, I'm always considering family history or any potential trauma past. And of course, anybody with mood disorders in their family background, or any trauma, whether it's abuse or neglect, that's going any hormonal fluctuations where we're seeing these dips in estrogen and those types of things, we're going to simply see an exacerbation of the psychological damage that trauma has done. So often you do see, there's actually research that shows, certain studies have actually demonstrated that there, I think it's somewhere around the 40% mark of a certain study, all of the women who had PMDD, 40% of these women had a sexual abuse background. So you're going to see these, again, these symptoms exacerbated during our periods, during this menstrual cycle, simply because of their trauma background or history, or mood disorders. If you have a propensity towards being depressed, or anxiety disorders, if that kind of runs in your family system, again, you're going to see more likelihood of these premenstrual syndrome symptoms showing up far more severe in women's lives.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Like we have to understand that our period is a microcosm of the environment. Like we have different seasons within our month. And that's what Marley's speaking to. You might have underlying trauma, and during a period of time, you can bury it, you can kind of suppress it and just power through your life. But during your cycle, during that season of your month, it's just all of our emotions are closer to the surface. There's less of a distance there. And that's not actually a bad thing. There's a lot of value in being tuned in to what's really happening for us and what that experience authentically is. And so, I was kind of joking with Marley before we started that, we don't expect, at least we're in Canada, so we don't expect to be wearing bikinis in December. We don't expect winter to be summer. And even if you live in the tropics, rainy season is different from dry season. You're not going to get good mangoes all year round. Like you can accept that the environment has these natural fluctuations. And it's important to know that your body has these seasons as well. We have to respect each season for the value that it brings. And during your cycle, the value is you can connect with your divine femininity. That is when your yin energy, your female energy, is at its maximal capacity. And for some of us, we're living in a male sort of mindset, sort of that young mindset, which is a masculine energy. We're powering through life. We're trying to be productive. We're doing the most all the time. We're ambitious. We're going after things. But we need a balance. And if you're out of whack with that masculine and feminine energy, you're going to have resistance and problems around your cycle. Am I making sense, Marley?
Absolutely. Honestly, I love that analogy because, and I wholeheartely agree that women ignore the natural seasons of their body that for us are, every month. And we really can't wear bikinis in November. We can't push ourselves to the max and take on more stressors during that 1 to 2 weeks, leading up to our period. Like it's just something that if we can bring more awareness to this, we have every right and almost a responsibility to ourselves, to our own emotional health, to act differently according to our cycle. But we're not taught that, right? We're taught to power through. This is our thing, right? Like it's like our masks, right? We show up and we feel guilty if we're not doing as much. But then it's also this horrible backlash where if we're stuck in irritability and anger and hopelessness and we're taking this out on people in our lives, we end up feeling guilty anyways. So it's like how we need to be proactive about this. So, but I love that analogy. I think it's just it makes so much sense. And yeah, I just think it's a really beautiful way to think about our cycle as seasons.
Yeah, yeah. And just connecting with that feminine intuition, resting more, being more nurturing to yourself, because you're probably
Mhm.
nurturing everybody else all the time. And Marley did speak to the fact that this is a belief system that is locked in when we were young. Like you can probably remember your first period at school. And if you got blood on your pants,
Mm.
oh, that was like supreme embarrassment. When you're walking to the bathroom, you have your tampon or your pad, at that time, probably a pad because you were young, was like tucked into your sleeve, right? Because heaven forbid that anybody sees that. And a lot of us will still do that when we're at work. We don't walk around with our tampon in our hand, right? Because there's like this underlying thing of like, whoa, TMI, right? But I think we are moving through that. And that's why it's so important for people like Marley to share their story. Like my mood definitely changes before my period. It's not as severe as a PMDD situation, but have I freaked out and cried before? Like, yes, I definitely have, right? Like, I don't, like, that's just a thing, right? And actually, it's kind of cathartic in a way. And we know that suppressed emotions have real inflammatory consequences for the body. We know that there's that mind body link. We know that anger suppressed leads to cardiovascular disease, leads to certain types of cancer formation. Like there is that link between emoting and health.
Mhm.
So if this is your window, of course, we don't want it to be an extreme experience for you, but if this is your window, take the opportunity. I do want to talk about a few things that, okay, we can
Mhm.
do from a natural perspective. So there's kind of two classes of herbs that can help you through this. One class of herb will help you if you're quite stressed out, quite burnt out, and you need a better connection between your brain and your ovaries. So your ovaries produce hormones because your brain produces hormones that tell them to.
Mm.
So when we can heal that connection, a lot of us experience fertility and our femininity. And it's a very deep healing that can take place with those herbs. So it could be like Angelica or Black Cohosh, or yeah, it's kind of in that vein. The other class of herbs are about estrogen detox. So
Mm.
for some of us, we have too much estrogen in our body. We can tell with the hormone test. I use the saliva test. You can tell with the hormone test if you're what's called estrogen dominant, which means you basically just have more estrogen than progesterone.
Mhm.
They're kind of out of whack. So hormones really are like an orchestra where all the instruments need to be playing the same song at the same volume, or like in relation to each
Right.
other. You can't have the violins playing a different tune than the flutes. It's going to be
Right.
awful. But for some of us, our hormones are like that. Our estrogen's
Mm.
playing a totally different song than our progesterone, and we need to kind of align those things. So estrogen detox helps with that quite a bit. And those supplements are everywhere. And there one supplement that I find gives people the most bang for their buck. Like within 3 cycles, a lot of times women feel better on these estrogen detox things, even after the first cycle. So I
Wow.
want you to think about those two classes of herbs. And then we also have progesterone. Particularly if you're having anxiety, progesterone is a herb that activates a relaxation sensation in the brain.
Mm.
So if you get your hormone test done, you do the saliva test, your progesterone comes back low, it's very easy to supplement with a little bit of progesterone cream. Super easy. It's not expensive. You can just do it around your cycle. Of course, this will be prescribed to you. I'm not just suggesting that you go in and do this on your own. You want to have testing. You want to keep your hormones, in line with each other, playing the same song, same volume. But a little bit of progesterone, it's great also for insomnia. If people have a lot of anxious insomnia around their cycle, I find progesterone is quite good.
Okay, yeah, because it just has that sort of relaxing, calming
Yeah,
effect. Makes sense.
yeah. It activates GABA in the brain. And speaking of the brain, so a lot of us need to do a little bit of work around our thoughts, because if your thoughts are overwhelmingly negative kind of throughout the month, that you don't have great self-talk, it's going to be worse around your cycle. It's going to be really heightened. Marley, can you help with women who have a lot of negative self-talk through the month?
Definitely. So if I was to, get a client in my office who was dealing with PMDD, that's where we would go right off the bat. Like, what are
Yeah.
your thought patterns like? Where do these stem from? And let's start taking a look at a really important and, like you and I are on the same wavelength around activating that beautifully calming part of our nervous system. So let's find ways to activate that so that we can stabilize and start to have more control over our negative thought cycles, right? Again, that mind body connection. So we want to be doing those nice belly breaths, particularly deep exhales. if you are dealing with anxiety and attached to those negative thought patterns, you can also just do some grounding exercises within the body. Just simply, one trick that in trauma somatic therapy oftentimes is used is just placing a hand on the side of your heart and then the other on your shoulder. And that's just
Oh,
literally to teach your body that it's a container, and that this is where, our emotions are held within the body, right? Our emotions are called feelings for a reason. We feel them in the body. So
I
just
love
being
this.
able to feel the walls and the boundary of your body to know that so they don't overwhelm you so much.
Oh,
And
wow.
yeah, it's a really cool tactic, right? There's so much
Yeah.
research around somatic therapy and treating emotions with the body, right? We talk about different body work. So those are really great ways to just calm you. And then again, that breathing techniques. But if you were to see a practitioner, oftentimes they would be, they'd use that CBT approach, cognitive behavioral therapy. So they're looking particularly at some of those thinking traps that are really familiar. And then you're working on trying to rewire and reframe, catch yourself in some of those thinking traps, like when you catastrophize, or that black and white thinking, or that ruminating and worrying. So you're starting to build a stronger awareness, and you want to ideally do this before that 1 to 2 weeks of, heightened whatever mood fluctuations, sadness, whatever comes up for you during that 1 to 2 weeks. You want to do this practice, right? And starting to understand what your triggers are, what's going to trigger you during that 1 to 2 week period, right? So let's have some awareness, and let's have some conversations with our support network, and just let them know what's going on for us, and let them know that I'm not making excuses for my behavior, but it's certainly going to be heightened. I might get more angry. I might get more irritable. This is not something that I want. I want to be able to be more clear and level-headed and kind and, be good all the time. But, unfortunately, I am going to be a little bit more triggered, and I would really appreciate some support. I will do my best to show up and apologize if I do snap at you.
Mhm.
But I just want you to let you know that this happens monthly, and I'm doing my work around it, and I'm doing my best to figure out some of these negative thought patterns that are coming up for me. So yeah, a lot of it takes time. But if you're able to bring your nervous system down to that balance with some, again, exercise is a big one, exercise, deep breathing exercises, some of those somatic therapy approaches, then of course, just tracking your triggers and beginning to have a different relationship with your thoughts.
Yeah, yeah. And Marley said it, get your support networks in place,
Yeah.
have a little bit of forethought. If this is every month for you, if
Yeah.
you're part of our community, if you're part of L60, then that's the time to check in with us and our team in our private community. If you
Mhm.
have a therapist, if you're fortunate enough to have that, if you have a sister, or like, schedule things in that work for you.
Yeah.
We really have to be thinking strategically about our life, and we have to engineer the life that we want and that is really optimal for us. So if we need a massage during that period, because a lot of us go for massage, or like we
Mhm.
hang out with girlfriends, but we don't really time it based on our cycle, right? Because we don't
No.
want to be like, we don't want our life to revolve around this terrible period. But
Yeah.
let that be a factor for you. Like, book your vacations when it works for you, take time
Mhm.
off when you need it. Like, really, really be strategic with that.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And, as you mentioned too, just reaching out to those communities. And I think, as I, alluded to in the beginning, and as you did too, around like the shame that is attached to having a period. Oftentimes we carry this from adolescence into our adulthood. And if we are not having those conversations, it can still run our lives. It can still keep us stuck in these unfortunate patterns. So if you have a community of women around you, make sure that you talk about it, because I bet you, like, 90% of your friends or the other women in your network are going to have had experiences like you, and you're not going to feel so isolated, and you're not going to feel so guilty and ashamed, and you're going to be like, oh, I'm not alone. Oh my gosh, how do you guys deal with this? Because this is horrible, and I feel guilty all the time, and I feel like crap, and I feel angry, and give me some tools, and just to know that you're not alone can be so helpful.
Yes. And if we're looking to focus on our divine feminine energy during that period of time, there's no better way to do it than connecting with other women. That's a very
Yeah,
primal sort of thing.
great.
Marley, I think we should pop over to our free Facebook group. We have a free Facebook group, Emotional Health Matters. search it and you will find us and we will let you in. It's a beautiful community of women who are all working on their emotional health. We have tips and tricks every single day. It's a place for you to share your stories, your wins, your losses, whatever's happening for you. Yeah, so give this video a like if this was a helpful topic for you. We're always like looking to make the best information possible for you guys. Definitely subscribe. We're live every single Tuesday. We do take questions if you have them. And other than that, join our free Facebook group. And if you really feel like you need help, like it's tough times, you're struggling, you're like PMS is really affecting your relationships, get a little bit of help with us. You know, having a naturopath on your side, plus a counselor, plus a mentor, like that's a pretty cool team. Okay, that's a cool team. And yeah, so find us, find L60. We have the links below, original60.com.
Right on.
Thanks, Marley. Let's
Dr.
pop over
Lydia.
to the EHM.